Hail and welcome to Witching Out Loud, the podcast where we celebrate the art of witchcraft and conjuring magic in your daily life. Join us for a cozy chat about witchy ways and practical woo-woo.
I'm Crystal with Unveil, necromancer, spiritual trainer, and mentor.
And I'm Kate, priestess for hire and an intuitive tarot reader.
Today I will be talking with my good friend Stella Wilkinson, death doula, end of life and grief guide, intuitive energy healer, hospice volunteer, and founder of Enchanted Mornings. I loved the quote I found on her website. Enchanted Mornings reclaims grief as sacred, honors death as a powerful teacher and ally, and weaves ritual, story, and ancestral wisdom into the healing process. So today we're going to chat about Stella's story and what brought her to death work, defining death and grief work, and the intersection of death work and witchcraft. And I'm going to start us off with a poem titled Elemental by Yvonne Abero, and I will put a link in the show notes as well. She has a requiem of pagan funerary prayers that are quite beautiful. The earth that moved, the air that filled, the fire that flashed, the water that flowed, the body that loved, are gone, all gone. We consign flesh to earth, breath to the winds, fire to ashes, the water to the deep places. But the spirit remains, enfolded in the embrace of the gods. Hail and welcome, Stella.
That was really beautiful. Thank you.
I'm so excited you agreed to come on the podcast. For our listeners, Kate is taking a little bit of a hiatus, so I'm going to be bringing on multiple guests, and Stella agreed to jump in. So tell us about yourself, Stella.
Yeah, well, thank you first for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's such an honor to be here in this space with you. How I came to spirituality and witchcraft is kind of a lifelong story. I think, like many others, I've always been a highly sensitive, highly attuned soul. I've always felt connected to the unseen, to nature, to energy and intuition. Growing up, I was what you might call the black sheep or the scapegoat of my family. And so early on, I think that just made me even more highly attuned to power dynamics and energetic shifts in the room. But I really didn't have the language in my early years to attribute any of that to witchcraft. I was really growing up, I was really locked into being what you would call like the good girl and like earning approval through grades and achievements and things like that. And it wasn't until I got older that I really started finding these words that would follow me. And really, my path deepened through two different types of initiation. First were both my pregnancies and birth. Going through that process, becoming a mom, even just in my pregnancy, I would have a lot of like visualizations or dreams or visitations from people who've passed. I was really able to sense into who each of my daughters, like their energy, their soul, and their spirit
That's lovely.
were. Yeah, and they really made themselves known to me, and they were both so different. And even still to this day, like that, those energies still match them exactly who they are. So pregnancy and having my daughters was one initiation where things just really opened up in ways that I didn't even really know how to work with. And then another initiation was through the death of my mom a few years ago, actually. And so, gosh, I think it's been about 3 years now, which is just wild. And She had a cancer diagnosis, and so it wasn't, a shock or a surprise, but it always is, even if you know of a terminal diagnosis. And I just had never stopped to envision what her end of life process was going to be like. My mom was a person who really did not want to talk about it, other than going through like the first initial like diagnosis and getting treatment. She really didn't want to talk about her end of life or what she wanted that to look like,
So
or
common, right?
yeah,
And so
completely.
hard for those of us trying to navigate the process for our loved ones when no one wants to have the conversation.
I found it so hard because I myself, like, I really wanted to be there for my mom. I really wanted to have these heart to hearts, and she just really didn't want to do that. And so over time, I had to learn that the best way that I could be supportive of her was to really respect her wishes. And that was a process that was hard, but ultimately, like, however she wanted to go about the process was absolutely her right.
Is that experience of losing your mom, and kind of navigating that, is that what drew you to death work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was 39 at the time when my mom passed. And I will say this with a caveat, this is an extremely privileged statement, that I have never had that close up of an experience in the death or dying process before. Certainly not of anyone like an immediate family member. And so I just had no idea what it would be like. And so I ended up, this was just a few days after Christmas in 2023, where we had all spent a really lovely, likely our last Christmas together at my mom's house. And a few days after that, I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning with this like overwhelming need to go be with my mom out of absolutely nowhere. And so, being someone who listens to those types of guidance, I threw some stuff in a bag in the dark. I threw it in my car. Like, obviously, I told my husband I need to go be with my mom. So I drove 2 hours in the dark. It was a really eerie drive. It was really quiet, of course. There's no traffic in the middle of the night. And when I got there, my stepdad, he was on the phone with hospice trying to get someone out to the house. And my mom was on the couch and she's just laying there and she's writhing in pain. And I went to go be with her, and I'm rubbing her back and I'm sitting next to her and I'm trying to get like assess what's going on here. And she just says over and over again, I just want to die. I just want to die. I just want to die. And I was like, okay. And I had that moment, that split second moment of like, am I going to freak out and panic here? Am I going to fall apart? Or am I just going to forget everything, push it off to this, like forget my own reactions to this, push that to the side, and I'm just really going to be here and be present for my mom? Of course, as a daughter, it hurts to hear that your mom is in so much pain, that death seems like a relief. But my job was very clear, and it was that I was going to help guide her transition to the other side. And once I made that decision, it was like something just came over my body. I felt so calm. I knew exactly what to do without knowing at all what to do, because we had not talked about any of this. And I went into what I called calm captain mode. And I was like sitting with my mom and I was like, I hear you, mom. I'm right here with you. Dad and I are right here with you, and we're going to help you. We're going to help you do this. We're here with you the whole way. And that really started opening up the portal and the threshold. And it was over 2.5 days really, where I was sitting by her side, tending to her, wiping her with a washcloth. Eventually hospice was able to come and give her pain medication, which really helped to lessen her pain, of course, soften her body, and really brought down the notch of urgency and panic. And so In that time, we were able to set up our space. My stepdad lit a fire. We had our favorite music playing. We had candles. We had pictures of her grandkids all around her. And I always say, like, if my mom had to die, she had a really beautiful death, and that really meant a lot to me. Ultimately, we were able to eventually get her up into her bedroom, which had the most gorgeous view. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and it was looking over the Sound and Mount Baker, and um, it was this really cold, gray, rainy day in December. I remade her bed with fresh sheets, cracked open her window so we could have that smell, that scent of fresh air. My brothers at that time were able to come to be there with us. And so we all had our last time with her where we got to say things and be with her. At that point, she wasn't able to talk anymore, but you could absolutely see what she was trying to communicate through her eyes. And that's something I'll never forget. And about an hour later, she passed away in my stepdad's arms with all of us surrounding her. And yeah, it was an experience that I've never been a part of like that. That other than the birth of my children, right? Because that's a threshold moment as well, where you're bringing spirits and energy in, and this is just the other side of that, where you are helping someone transition through the veil to whatever comes next.
I mean, what a beautiful gift that one, you were able to give to her and have that groundedness in who you were to be able to just do that work in that moment. And then what a gift for all of you to have that ease. And I think our society is so separated from death now that
Yes.
people don't get that experience. They're so scared of it, but it's so beautiful.
It was shocking to me how beautiful a death could be. That's not something I had ever considered before. It always seems, I mean, of course, it is sad. It is all of those things, and it can be tragic, and it can be painful, and it can be scary. And there can be so much joy and love and tenderness and beauty. And that's just not something that I've ever considered before.
Yeah. I mean, when we think of our ancestors, like we were in our homes and we passed in our homes. We didn't go to some hospital or retirement home or anything. Like we were there and our families washed our bodies afterwards. And we're so far removed from it.
We are so far removed from it. And yeah, it's interesting because after that process with my mom, I felt like I went really deep into the threshold. It honestly took me about 2 or 3 days to fully come back to my body. I felt like a part of me went with her. Like I went a little too far past the veil. And so, of course, like I'm grieving, I'm sad, I'm overwhelmed. And there's another part of me, there are other parts of me that I'm just like, what the heck was that? What did I just experience? I want to understand more about this. And so that's really what led me to becoming a death doula, taking a 3-month certification course. I wanted to surround myself with people who were already in this area, who've been doing this kind of work for years, who are in these spaces. I wanted to know like what their thoughts were, how they could do this work, what this work meant to them, the kind of conversations they were having. And similarly, why I also signed up to become a hospice volunteer. I'm sure everyone in my life thought I was totally crazy. A few months after my mom died, they're like, wait, you want to do this more? And I'm like, kinda. Because, in that experience, it was a master class in spirituality and what presence means. And it was the most like mindful meditation and presence I've had, way beyond any mat, any yoga class, any experience I've ever had. And so I wanted to know more about it.
It's popped into my head while you were saying that. One, can you define what a death doula is and does for listeners who don't know what that is?
Sure. Doula, the word doula means to serve. And so a death doula is one who serves at like during the process of death and dying. It's non-medicalized support at the end of life. And that can look like a lot of different things. I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions about a death doula is that we only sit with people who are actively dying. And yeah, sure, that is one part of being a death doula, but there are lots and lots and lots of other parts. I mean, if you can imagine at a really chaotic time in your life that can be really overwhelming or really scary, having someone there to support you, helping you understand what's happening, what will happen next, kind of like the process of death and dying, like what to look out for. These are the signs. This is when you should call, your other supports, your doctor or your hospice care team. It can also be like helping the person who is dying prepare for their own legacy. Like what do they want to leave for other people? It might be letters, it could be a video, it could be, the sky's the limit, truly, what people want or could create. It can also be something as so simple as just running errands. Like, if the family member is sitting with the person who is dying, they don't necessarily want to leave to go pick up prescriptions, or they're not thinking about eating. They're not thinking about staying hydrated. And so a death doula is someone who can tend to the family as they are tending to the person who is dying. So it can involve a lot of different things.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And my other question is, how is it different for you from like being hospice for your mom versus strangers in hospice care?
I would say it's easier in a sense to be with those who are at the end of their lives when it's not someone that I'm related to, because I don't have the same energetic connection as I did with my mom.
Well, I've known Stella for about 3 years. Is
Yeah,
it 3 years?
yeah,
Yeah. We met at a witch camp.
love that for us.
I do too. Fantastic introduction story, and a fellow Taurus.
Yes.
So she has definitely this witch mom energy, this nurturing, and I can just imagine what a gift it is for people to have you there in that moment.
Thank you for saying that. That's funny because right when my children were born, I went through this phase where I strongly identified as someone called Mama Witch. So I feel like you hit the nail
It's
on the
full
head
on
there.
mama witch energy.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit
Okay.
about death work.
Yeah. Sounds
Let's get
good.
deeper into it.
Yeah, definitely. So, where do I start? So, I also just want to share that just several weeks after my mom passed, my stepdad suffered a massive frontotemporal stroke, and several months later, we also lost him. And so, in that process, I became a student of what happens after someone dies. And so after they passed, I left my 17-year career as a pediatric speech and feeding therapist. And for about a year and a half, I worked full time on my parents' estate. We did a full financial investigation into their whole lives, all their accounts, all their bills, all their credit cards, insurance policies, their cars. Nothing was planned for or prepared. We just had no idea that was in the cards for my stepdad. And yeah, so some of the things that I want to share today are some of the things that I've learned along the way. And where I'd like to start is by first touching on how we got here culturally and societally about death and grief and why we don't go anywhere near that. And of course, that brings us to patriarchy and capitalism. So, capitalism, of course, turned death into an industry, right? It was before the 1860s, most funerals in America were held at home. So, families, typically women, would tend to their loved ones as they died. And it was after the Civil War in 1864 that embalming became necessary in order to transport soldiers' bodies home. And then in 1865, for the funeral procession of Abraham Lincoln, that really popularized embalming. He was embalmed and his body traveled for 2 weeks via train so people in the country could pay their last respects. And so after that, embalming was now considered proper and respectful and something that was really only available to the affluent or the elite. So one thing turned into the next, and death care became a trade, which is not a bad thing by any means. But what is challenging is when capitalism finds a way to profit from death care when people are arguably at their most vulnerable. So 1882, the National Funeral Directors Association was formed, which is still the nation's leading association for funeral service professionals. And I have a few other little fun facts, little stats to share.
I wanted to share something right before you go into those, because talking about capitalism, patriarchy, I'm going to toss Christianity under that bus too. When I was out at the Between the Worlds conference, I got the great opportunity to meet one of my heroes, which is Mortellus. Mortellus is a death care worker, a necromancer, embalm, right? They do the whole thing from start to finish. And they're not licensed as a medical examiner in North Carolina because they're pagan. And so they taught this whole class on funerary rites and talking about how they're trained. Funeral directors are trained to prepare bodies. And there's a whole book in their training that is filled with Christianity. And then there's one tiny little pamphlet that's like 30 pages that covers all other religions.
Wow.
And under pagans, it says that it doesn't matter what you do with the body because they're no better than dog meat.
Wow.
That's in the training manual. And for Muslims, they use the slurs inside of it to describe their death rites.
It's horrible.
Yeah, and that's what's being taught today. So it's really wrapped up in that only Christian bodies are to be respected in death.
That's right. Who can afford it, right? And who do we consider to be the most important, hierarchically in our society?
What did they share? To create a preferred burial rites page for yourself and a 5 wishes document, like super simple, so that as a pagan, a witch, or any other religion outside of Christianity, your death rites are respected.
I'll have to share with you, Starhawk, of course, has written a gorgeous book, The Pagan Book of Living and Dying, which is absolutely a gorgeous read. Anyway, I'll give you some more book recommendations. So the total revenue produced from the U.S. funeral industry in 2016 was $14.2 billion, with a B, billion. Enough embalming fluid is buried every year to fill 8 Olympic-sized pools. The industry uses more steel in caskets alone than was used to build the Golden Gate Bridge, and it annually uses enough reinforced concrete to construct a 2-lane highway from New York to Detroit. There are massive implications on the environment, right? According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average cost of a funeral in 2018 was 177% more expensive than a funeral in 1990. So
Yeah.
why do we care?
What is the average cost of a funeral? Like what? It's over 10,000, isn't it?
It can range depending on what you want. Is it cremation? Is it burial? What kind of casket? What kind of decorations and the inside? Whatever you want. But yes, it can absolutely be more than $10,000, and that's not even considering the cemetery costs and fees and death certificates and everything like that. So.
Do you know when they started doing the concrete linings in graves?
I don't know when that started. No, I don't. So I share those statistics. Why do we care? Why does this matter? And what's interesting is with the generation of baby boomers nearing the end of their life, we're going to have waves and waves and waves of death. It's actually referred to as the silver tsunami, where there's not going to be enough professionals or resources to manage the volume of death. And death care is a skill that will have to be transferred back into the hands of the family. And so it's really important to start questioning our discomfort with death and start wondering why that is. Another thing to be mindful of is by 2030, millennials and Gen Z will constitute 75% of the workforce. And so we have a real opportunity to make a huge impact on the death care industry. So already there's been a lot of really great things moving forward, movements such as the death positive movement or the movement for more eco-friendly burials. We just have to know about it, right? We have to know that there are other options than what is
And
just.
to know about it, we have to actually talk about death.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly.
If everyone shuts down the conversation, then you're having it when really you should
Under
be
the
doing.
wave of grief and
Yeah.
trauma and sadness. And I'll tell you something, it is not the best time to be learning new things.
No.
It's not a great time to be doing that. Take it from me.
Well, and I wonder if that is partially intentional through capitalism, through patriarchy, through religious beliefs, in that intentionally to get us to stop talking about death and to fear death so much, because then they can capitalize on it more. We'll spend more when we're in grief because we just want to get the decision over with.
Or we want to do the very best for our family. My family deserves the best. Yeah, you couldn't have said it better, and I completely agree. And I do want to talk a little bit more about how patriarchy shows up in death care. So that's a perfect segue. So we all know that patriarchy shapes whose knowledge is preserved and reported and whose care is valued. So we know historically death care was led by women, washing bodies, sitting vigils, tending to grief. And as death care became more and more professionalized, much of that elder, healer, herbalist, wise woman, medicine woman knowledge was pushed aside and devalued and replaced by male dominated institutions such as medicine and the funeral industry. And so, with this professionalization, we lost touch with the very heart of death care and the very important and very much needed community and rituals that tend to our bodies and our souls that we absolutely need after someone dies. So patriarchy also shows up in how we define what's normal for emotional expression. In our culture, grief is really privatized. It's not communal. It's something that happens behind closed doors. Certain types of grieving, like anger or wailing or being in mourning for what is deemed to be too long, is seen as too much or too messy, maybe labeled as too hysterical, if that rings a bell. And so now the majority of death care work is based on the largely unpaid physical and emotional labor of women, such as death doulas, hospice volunteers, even though it's an essential healthcare need. So, kind of at both ends here, the beginning of life and nearing the end of life relies so much on the unpaid labor of women. Anyway, so bringing it all together, capitalism requires productivity, and grief is absolutely not productive in capitalism
Nope.
terms.
Well, and one thing was rolling around in my head and I couldn't quite form the question. That kind of unpaid labor of women and how it's been so villainized and devalued in our society in so many areas are all the areas that help us move through it easier. So having those rituals, having the community around you to help move you through the grief process, like neuroscience tells us that's what gives us resiliency and helps us rewire those pathways. And we've made it so solitary. And then that labor has to fall on women because we're the ones that are going to show up for each other.
100%. Yeah. Our culture, our society is so individualistic because it's scary to them who are in charge for people to gather together. And I really think that there's nothing in this world that cannot be solved by women gathering in circles. So,
Which is why they're so scared of it.
Exactly. Then they should be scared of it.
Yes.
Yes.
And we should be doing it more often.
Agree.
Yeah. Like when I think of the process you went through for your mom that you described, like that is missing. Like we've taken the care, we've taken the love, we've taken the compassion out of death.
Yes. Yep.
And made an even more lonely, horrible process.
That's right. And then the whole experience after someone has died, I experienced a lot of loneliness. And I think anyone who's gone through something that I call big grief, capital B, capital G, can relate to this because, you have like the most well-meaning friends or family members say to you things like, well, at least she's in a better, or at least you got to say goodbye, or, all of these things. And it makes you feel even more alone because you can't truly express how you are feeling for the comfort of other people. And so you continue to just have all of these thoughts and feelings. But, say it's been 6 months after someone's died and people are like, you still aren't over that? Like, didn't that happen like 6 months ago? It's
And
just
I think that's why people isolate themselves so much. I was thinking of my good friend who lost her brother and her dad very close together. And so she was down for a long time and she didn't want to reach out and ask for help because she felt like she should be over it. It was hard to know how to support. Like, what are the ways that we can support someone as they're going through grief? Our society doesn't really teach us that.
We don't know because we're not given a chance to practice ever. So it makes so much sense to me that people don't know what to do or what to say. And ultimately, there isn't anything to do or to say. It's just to be a presence, right? And giving someone space to say whatever they want to say or not say, or do whatever they want to do or not do. Yeah. So to summarize really briefly, along the way, the intimate relational work of tending to the dying, once held in communities, usually by women, was slowly replaced by male-dominated professional systems, and along the way, embodied knowledge, ritual, and emotional expression were minimized. So when patriarchy and capitalism intersect in death care, it becomes less communal, less accessible, less embodied, and less sacred. When you put all of that together, it makes sense that we've become so death phobic. So then we start asking, like, how did we get so disconnected from something that is so fundamentally human, and who benefits from that disconnection? And like you were saying before, when death is hidden, it becomes unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things are easier to fear and easier to control. When people are disconnected
And easier to exploit.
Bingo. Yes. And when people are disconnected from death, they're also disconnected from the ancestral practices, from community interdependence and spirituality outside of dominant religion. But when death is reclaimed through presence, ritual, and community, a lot of times it becomes less frightening and more meaningful. And that sounds an awful lot like witchcraft to me.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
So how do we bring that back into death work?
Yes. I mean, death and grief work intersect so well with the things that I love about witchcraft. At its core, both are about the relationship with the unseen, the thresholdy, liminal spaces, the veil between the worlds. Birth is a threshold, and so is death, and we should be talking about both. Grief is a liminal space as well, because you're no longer who you were, but you're not yet the person you're becoming. Death, grief, and witchcraft also have an ancestral connection. It's honoring and working with those who came before. There's rituals, there's altars, there's offerings, which all create ongoing relationship with the dead. And death and grief and witchcraft all have to do with reclaiming our intuition and our embodied knowing. Witchcraft nor grief work is ever about fixing pain or preventing death. It's really about sitting in the unknown. It's really about building capacity to hold ourselves and each other through difficult times. And it's allowing the process of change. And of course, there's cycles. Witches love cycles. I love cycles. Yep. Mm-hmm. Right. And death is part of the cycle. And of course, as we've been talking about, it's the one that gets ignored or pushed to the side, which makes sense given our culture. No one is to be individually blamed for that. But our society is so obsessed with love and light and with ascension, which of course is like part of the journey, but it's not the complete story. And our avoidance of death or the descent into the underworld really limits our spiritual development and growth. I mean, look at nature, look at our gardens. Growth only happens in the dark. We can only meet others as deep as we have met ourselves. And as I know you know, there are so many little juicy gold nuggets to discover in the underworld, in the dark.
Well, and I think that that speaks to people's fear of like shadow work, of therapy, of, really seeing themselves, accepting themselves for who they are, is trying to live outside of that cycle. Like trying to be happy all the time is exhausting because it's not true. And then everyone's walking around just being fake and phoning in life, which is no way to go about it. Whereas when, like, the more I accept the parts of me that I thought were awful and unlovable, like the more I do that, the richer and deeper my experience of other people is. Like you said, I can meet them at a different level.
That's right. When your roots go down really, really deep, you have a really strong foundation to grow and reach out from. One last thing that I want to say about death and grief and witchcraft and how they intersect is through activism and advocacy. And to me, there is nothing witchier, nothing sexier than advocating for the rights of Mother Earth and the marginalized and the oppressed. And so in death care, it's again, it's not about telling people what to choose, but it's about making sure that they know that they have a choice. It's about disrupting systems of power, which is a radical act. It's cultural work. It's normalizing what we've lost and humanizing it. It's alchemy. It's shifting fear to love, control to trust, and isolation to community. And it's also about access and equity. Not everyone experiences death care in the same way. There's inequitable access to care. There's financial barriers and systemic inequities in how people are treated at end of life. And so to me, death work is deeply tied to justice, social justice work. They're inherently linked. Yeah.
Witchcraft in general, always been political. I was thinking of something that Mortella said in their class about how they go about support. So they can't take any, they can embalm people and do all of the death rites. They can't take money for it. So they show up at your house and they transfer the body from the mortuary or hospital, wherever it was at, bring it to the home in the casket. They dress the body, wash the body, like everything at home in your space. And they sit vigil with the body and with grief, and like exactly what you did for your mom as she was passing, Mortellus does after they've passed. And I had never really thought about it until they were sharing it. And it's just such a radical difference between what the death care industry does. It's a silver metal table and you're with strangers and they're manhandling your body and washing it and whatever. They don't even know you.
They don't even
And
know you.
they don't even know you. And most death workers that are doing that work are being paid minimum wage or barely above.
Yeah.
And the beauty of what you do, what Mortellus does, I think, God, what a gift to help people move through their grief so much easier, to see their loved one there surrounded in flowers and able to set their favorite cocktail next to them, or right, have that whole ritual. We don't have enough ritual in our world anymore, and that is where witchcraft comes in to help us move through those spaces so much easier.
I agree. And it is such an honor, truly, to be at that threshold with family members, with the person who's passed. It's tender, it's beautiful, it's sacred, and it is truly such an honor to be let into such a vulnerable, tender time for, for the family. It's an honor to be there. Yeah.
Well, how do people go about bringing a death doula, or having some of these things we're talking about and bringing that back into their passing of their loved ones? How do they go about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just a quick Google search in your area, death doulas near me, can bring up a whole list. But you clearly would like to find someone who you connect with, who you vibe with. And so the training that I went through, they have a directory where you can search by state for death doulas by state. And so if there's a certain training that, you really connect with, you can absolutely go onto their website and look at the directory. You can start talking to different friends about it and see if like, oh yeah, my sister's roommate's cousin, they had a death doula and this is what they did and da 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 da. So start having those conversations. There's also a lot of books, right? Because there shouldn't necessarily be a financial barrier to having access to a death doula. I know a lot of death doulas work on like a sliding fee type scale, and many are just so committed to doing the work and to advocating for what families need at the end of life that a lot of times they might do some pro bono work in those cases. But if it's not something that you feel comfortable with having, someone come into this part of your journey, there are a lot of books out there that are really incredible with giving you lots of different ideas or things that you haven't thought about before. And there's a few that I can share with you, and we can put them in the show notes.
Well, what's next for Stella?
Well, so I created Enchanted Mornings, MOURN mornings, because I'm so inspired by the idea of communal spaces for grief work, ritual being held and witnessed in our process. But what I've learned is that a lot of people aren't really ready to just walk into that space right away. And again, that makes sense given everything we've just talked about. So instead of starting there, I'm moving just slightly upstream. And I just recently went back to grad school to become a psychotherapist, actually. And so, in this way, I can deepen my skills in sitting with people in more intimate one on one ways, build relationships as they are navigating their own grief and loss. And then, so maybe from there, we can start branching back out into the community.
Mm. That just reminded me of the death cafes. I've seen those popping up
Yes,
too as a way to
yes.
get into community and talk about death. There's one up in Port Townsend that we went to when we were at Witch Camp. And then what's the one? Crescent Moon in Tacoma. I saw they just advertised that they were doing a regular death cafe. So come have a cup of tea and talk about death and end of life stuff. Yep.
That's so cool. I hadn't seen that one at Crescent Moon. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah. So, yeah, people can find me at Enchanted Mornings or on Instagram, but I will say, like, I'm in another liminal space where things are shifting, and Enchanted Mornings is also evolving as I'm evolving. And I don't really know what it's going to be yet. And that's okay because if grief has taught me anything, it's how to sit in the unknown and trust that the clarity will come when it's time. So, yeah.
Through Enchanted Morning, Stella, do you conduct funerals for people as well inside of that work?
I have not conducted a funeral. I would be honored to do so. I would absolutely work collaboratively with the family. But really, in Enchanted Mornings, I'm tending to people who are grieving a loss, who are navigating death, a transition, or an unnameable grief. You don't even have to know what you're grieving to have grief. Intending to sorrow that's just ready to be witnessed. I can be a guide. I can walk with you through the underworld. If you're experiencing like a descent or a dark night of the soul, I can help people reconnect to their ancestors, building relationships with their ancestors through rituals and stories. I can help people who are magic curious, who feel called to their intuitive abilities or energy work, and just really holding sacred space in circle for people who want to come to these communal rituals to be seen, to be witnessed, where we can hold each other without being judged or shamed or dismissed, and instead just bring our full selves. And it's not even we have to go through the talking about like what happened, but just we can be really honest in what we're bringing and how we're going through it.
I've been honored to conduct several funerals. So, little known fact about me, I am a reverend. So, I can do marriages, I can do funerals, and I love doing funerals. I think to be able to be that calm, steady presence, and I love to get the stories from all the family members and then blend that into the actual ceremony. Those stories get told and shared around. It's such an honor
Yeah,
to be in that space.
it really
Yeah.
is.
I want to end with one more of those poems. This one is called Requiem. May they rest in the arms of the star goddess, in the eternal twilight of the summer lands, the valley of yews, the hall of heroes, the islands of the blessed, the unknown regions, and may they flourish. Go do witchy shit.
Do witchy shit.
Thanks for listening to Witching Out Loud. You can find us at Witching Out Loud on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow us for highlights and reminders. Subscribe for witchy tips, seasonal celebrations, and extended show notes. If you love our show and want to support us further, there's an option to support us monetarily on Substack, as well as sponsorships and advertising opportunities. So please share with us how you are witching out loud. Now go do witchy shit.